Hello, I'm Alistair Humphreys, and I'm here today to talk about the stuff I would take with me on a backpacking trip. The equipment you take depends really on where you're going, of course, the seasons, the plans, your aims, what you're trying to get out of it, and how long you're going for. But what's interesting is that whether you're going for 24 hours, 24 days, 24 weeks, or 24 months, the stuff you take is going to be pretty much the same. In fact, you probably give more thought to what you're going to take for a 24-hour trip than you would if you're going to walk across Europe, in which case it's just minimum, minimum, minimum. But if you're going for an overnight micro adventure, like I'm talking about today, then there's a lot more flexibility of choice. So, what I'm doing here, a trip after work, squeezing in a bit of adventure around the edges of daily life. You get on the train, you head out of town, you hike for a few hours, you camp overnight, hike a few hours more in the morning perhaps, head back home. What would I take for a trip like that? Well, let me show you what I've got in my pack. Starting with the magical appearance of my comfy chair. A comfy chair. Am I getting old and soft, or am I just getting smart? Who knows? Who cares? Right, backpack. Going away for 24 hours. You can either go mega minimalist, a little tiny 16-litre backpack, which makes you feel smug, it's light, it's easy, it's kind of geeky, it's kind of fun. It's probably not going to be the most luxurious night you'll ever have. Or you can go massive, take a pillow, I've gone for overnight camps where I've taken a poiki, which is a steel South African cooking pot, weighs about 10 kilograms. I've taken that for an overnight hike. I've taken ice. I've taken a pillow. Or what we're going to do today, something in the middle. This is what, a 28-litre rucksack, which is ample for a night away. And actually, to be honest, this would be kind of good for any trip where you don't need to carry lots of days of food and water. Once you need to factor in lots of food and water, you need a bigger pack. I walked 500 miles through Spain a few years ago, and I made a really big mistake in that I tried to travel really minimalist and lightweight, but the backpack I chose was also minimal and lightweight, which meant that its shoulder straps, like this one, were really thin. Fine for a short trip, really painful when you're carrying enough water for 24 hours in baking hot Spanish summer. And I also didn't really have enough spare room in my pack for all of that stuff. So if you're going for a long trip, factor in some extra space for that and don't skimp on the padding and comfort of your pack. So we can talk about the pack, we can talk about clothes. For an overnight trip, pretty simple. I've just got like a basic wicking top, already a little bit smelly, but they're really good when it's for quick drying. They're much better than a normal t-shirt, really. Funky pair of shorts, oof, a fine pair of legs, and just normal trainers. I haven't worn anything but normal trainers out on hiking trips for many years. I walked across India, southern India, in a pair of trainers. So I'm pretty much a trainer's guy rather than a hiking shoes guy these days. The backpack itself then, well, let's see. Let's have a look inside, shall we? See what we got in here. So, I can't get in. I'll just magically open the next item. And the stuff we're going to look at first are the clothes that I take for an overnight trip. Really hard, totally seasonal, totally depends on the weather forecast, but generally speaking, if I was going to go away for a overnight backpacking hiking trip, I'd set off in the clothes that I'm planning to wear, and I plan to wear these for the entirety of the trip. Whether it's a day, a week, or a month, I'd be wearing this outfit all day, every day is my plan. Evening times though, or if the weather gets bad, you want something else, so maybe some little warm top, I like a gilet, because one of the main things you're trying to do is get maximum warmth for minimum space. So these are really good for keeping your core warm, nice to sleep in at night. Also make you look, I don't know, do they make you look like a farmer, or do they make you look like a posh guy in Chelsea? I don't really know. They keep you warm in the woods anyway. And then a warm top at night. I really like, what I love about fleeces is ones with hoods, because instantly you've got yourself a warm top and you've got yourself a hat, and you also look kind of like a middle-aged gangster rapper. Oh, I'm going to get some serious heat on here. Trousers. If I'm just going for a short overnight backpacking trip when my only concern is functionality and not fashion, not that that's ever a speciality of mine, I go leggings. Leggings every time. Leggings are great. They're really warm, they're quick drying. You wear them in bed as pajamas. Wear leggings. And then the perennial issue of British backpacking, what kind of raincoat do you take? Is pretty much always going to take a raincoat, and the balance really is between whether you're going to go for a really really thin raincoat, ventilated armpits, really lightweight, really minimal. It'll be fine in a shower. If it lashes it down, you're going to get soaked. But look, the benefit packs down tiny, or if you're going to go bigger, a good solid winter chunky raincoat like this, which is the sort of thing you can take in the mountains. You know, as fun as it is to pack the really light little raincoat, for a couple of 100 grams, I pretty much go for the proper decent raincoat every time. Man, I'm seriously hot. So, oh man, really hot. So, but lest this turn into a striptease video, my first chance to go viral, let me show you what's next in my pack. So once you've dealt with the clothing side of your packing, you need to think about your shelter, nighttime stuff. All my nighttime stuff goes in a dry bag. All my clothes go in a separate dry bag. My food and things go in a separate bag. These are brilliant, partly for organising your pack, for compartmentalising things, but also, and it means you can find stuff and you don't end up with just a massive bag full of chaos. But it importantly keeps things dry. And if nothing else, you absolutely need to keep your sleeping bag dry and the dry clothes that you'll wear in the evening. So the rule is you wear what you're going to wear in the day, however wet it gets. That's tough. You've got your raincoat, you just carry on, you're fine, you're moving a lot, so you're okay. But at night, once you set up your shelter, you need a set of dry, warm clothes. You need a dry, warm shelter and dry, warm clothes for night. Once you've got your shelter up, only once you've got your shelter up, then you take off your horrible wet clothes, quickly put on your dry clothes, and you hide from the weather. That means if you are, say, in a tent, choosing a tent, or in a bothy or a basher, a bivvy, whatever you're in, if you then need to go out in the night and it's absolutely lashing it down with rain, if it's really raining, you might have to consider just taking off all of your warm, dry clothes and going out to the loo or to fetch water, wherever it is, shivering your lily white butt off, because at all costs, you must not let your comfy, dry clothes get wet. And that also brings us to one of the great horrors of backpacking. I'm not selling this very well. Waking up in the morning when it's pouring down with rain and you're warm and cozy. What you have to do then, before you pack everything away, is you have to take off your lovely warm clothes and put on the soggy, stinking, freezing cold, possibly even iced up clothes from the night before. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. But that then means you can store your warm, dry clothes away in your waterproof dry bag, pack them in your bag, and the next night you'll be able to repeat the process. If you don't do this, if you break that technique and you basically are a wimp and you get your warm clothes wet, then the next evening is going to be really miserable and possibly even rather serious. If you're in winter conditions, this can be a life or death matter, that at night you've got warm, dry shelter and a spare pair of clothes. Anyway, enough banging on about that. Yes, so imagine, if nothing else, imagine that if someone chucks your rucksack in the river, will your sleeping bag and those dry clothes remain dry? Right. shelter options at night, there's quite a few different options, starting with hammock. Hammocks are great. Camping in the woods, hammocks are brilliant. They're fun, parachute silk, really lovely, self-storing little bag. I love a hammock. Hammocks are great if you've got two trees that are positioned the right distance apart. Unfortunately, that's often quite difficult in Britain, seeing as we have got one of the least forested countries in the entire world. But if you know for sure where you want to go, then hammock can be great. Weirdly, hammocks are actually quite nice things to have when it's pouring down with rain, providing you rig a tarpaulin up above it, because it means you're off the ground. And if you're in a tent or a bivy bag, the ground potentially can, in worse scenarios, become a giant puddle. So in a hammock, you're raised up above that, and it can be a really nice place when it's pouring with rain if you've rigged up the tarpaulin appropriately. Normally I use a hammock just in summertime because they're actually quite cold places to sleep. They're much colder than tents. Tents are warmer than bivy bags are warmer than hammocks. I guess that's because you've got the breeze blowing and you've got the coolness coming from underneath as well. So unless it's really hot summer, whenever I'm sleeping in a hammock, I always put a sleeping mat in the hammock as well, line that to give me an extra layer of insulation. And I always assume that I'm going to be colder than I imagine, so I always sleep with a woolly hat as well. So, got the hammock option. I'm going to show you when I finish waffling. I'm going to show you that when it's assembled. I've decided against the tent for a short overnight trip. The weather forecast didn't seem too bad, seems all right, so I've decided against that, and I've gone for the bivy bag option as well. In this, both the hammock and the bivy bag, they come in these sort of clever self-contained storage pouches. Note to manufacturer, please make the initial pouches that things come in bigger, because it's quite, when you get in a shop you see something, it's tiny, oh that's brilliant, and then never again can you get it back in there. So I've stuffed this in here for the purposes of this video. I have to confess that in reality I never use this. What I do when I put away my bivy bag, to store my bivy bag, I just grab it by the tail. You have to grab it by the tail, otherwise you end up with a giant balloon. I grab it by the tail and I just roll it round my hand like that to get all the... not like that, because I've tied myself in a knot. Cut, start again. Right, here's how I roll up my bivy bag. I grab the end of it and I just... oh, goodness me, the pressure of rolling up a bivy bag on camera. I basically just screw it up like that and shove it into my dry bag. Bivy bags have been one of the great joys of my last decade of life, of doing micro adventures, of encouraging other people to do micro adventures. I never used a bivy bag on long expeditions where it's much nice to have your home of a tent. A tent can be a home, but for a short little trip, bivy bags are great. They're small, they're cheap, they pack down. It means you can camp in unobtrusive places. They're fun. Sleeping out under the stars, you feel childlike, you feel a bit nervous, you feel a bit silly, but they're great. And if the weather's set fair, then they're a brilliant night out. How to use a bivy bag: you slip your sleeping bag inside it. Some people wedge their sleeping mat inside the bivy bag as well, but perhaps because I'm quite big, I always find that far too constricting. So I just put my roll mat on the ground, and then I lie the bivy bag on top of. That is whatever feels comfortable to you. And then once you're in it, you get in your sleeping bag, you get in the bivy bag, you pull it up over your head and sleep like this. If the weather gets bad or if it gets windy, there's a little drawstring, you can pull it tight until eventually, how does this work on the camera? You just have a small little breathing hole like this for when the weather is really cold. It can feel, to be honest, a bit claustrophobic. So if that sounds pretty grim, save the bivy bag for just spring, summer, maybe autumn conditions when you can just have it up over your head. Or if on a warm night, you just have it around your neck, whatever. They're not rocket science. You'll figure it out. Sleeping mat, absolutely essential. I've gone through periods of my life when I've considered that a sleeping mat is even more important than a sleeping bag. They Obviously, they provide softness and comfort from the ground, but really importantly, they provide insulation. So if the weather is set to be cold, then you really need a good sleeping mat. This one is a inflatable one. Blow it up and sleep on it. I'll show you all this rigged up at the end. Advantages of these inflatable ones: they pack down small, they're comfy, and they're really warm. Disadvantages: they're quite puncture. They get punctures, particularly. And there's a spectrum again between inflatable mats that are quite thick and robust, but heavier, to ones that are really lightweight, good for ultramarathons, stuff like that, but risk getting punctures. I've got the hiccups. Not good when you're ploughing heroically through a video which dozens of people will watch. And then you need sleeping bag. This is quite a small summer sleeping bag. Sleeping bags are a nightmare. In an ideal camping world, you'd have loads of different sleeping bags. You'd have a 1-season one, a 2-season one, a 3-season one, a 4-season one. You might have a synthetic one for if you think the weather might be a bit wet, because down sleeping bags are rubbish if they get wet, and they can get wet either through bad dry bag technique, as I mentioned earlier, or through no fault of your own in really cold weather. Just your breathing in the night and your body giving off moisture, water vapor in the night, means that over time in cold weather, down sleeping bags can get really quite damp and lose a lot of their heat value. So there's that issue to consider. And then there's the cost. Down sleeping bags are lovely and luxurious and comfy, but they're a lot more expensive generally than synthetic bags. So it's, when you're choosing a sleeping bag, it's a complete compromise between cost versus cheapness, heaviness versus lightness, down versus synthetic, and what season you go for. One thing you can do is buy maybe 1 season less than you think so. So if you don't think you'll often go out in winter, get a 3-season bag, and then if it gets really cold, you can top it up with a silk liner. And actually, I'd recommend using a silk liner pretty much always in your sleeping bag, because it means you don't have the oils of your body don't seep out into your sleeping bag, and you don't need to therefore wash your sleeping bag very often, which isn't great for the bag, and it's a massive hassle. So I'd really recommend a silk sleeping bag liner at all times. It also feels really luxurious. On hot summer nights, you can just use the silk liner. On colder nights, the silk liner gives you an extra chunk of warmth. And then if it's really cold, you just wear more layers, and always a woolly hat's really good to wear if it's freezing cold at night. And you can pull it down over your eyes for the summer months so that you don't get woken up at 4 a.m. when it gets light. Sleeping bag, vital. Don't forget it, as I once did in Lebanon. I had a freezing cold night sleeping in a Roman temple with no sleeping bag, and don't get it wet. And then finally, my little sleeping bag of bags, a tiny little pillow, a little travel pillow, because I'm getting old and soft. In my youth, I used to stuff a dry bag with any clothes I wasn't using and use that as a pillow. And to be honest, that worked pretty well. The trouble is, if you're wearing all your clothes, you then have to use your shoes as a pillow or something, which isn't great. So I have a little tiny travel pillow. Sleeping under a bivy bag is brilliant, unless it rains. If it rains, it is grim. So if there's any hint at all of rain, you might want to take a tarpaulin with you. A tarpaulin, it's big, stretches out thing. This is a specific backpacking one, so it comes with attachment points, with tent pegs, and with guy lines. Funky little, tiny little, very sort of slender, lightweight. Get out! Lightweight little tent pegs. The guy lines I've already attached to it, and I will show you this assembled in a short while. Right, next in my bag of tricks. What is next? Let me show you. Next up in my magic bag of overnight backpacking equipment is food, cooking in the evenings at night. Now, there's lots of options here. You could just go to the pub. Go to the pub, have a massive meal, stumble out to the woods, go to sleep. You might forage along the way in the little newsagents you find in villages throughout the land, foraging off packages of not very nice sandwiches and bottles of dandelion and burdock. Or you might bring with you some sandwiches. You might decide, however, that you want to do some cooking. So what are the options for cooking on a backpacking trip? These really depend on how much you care about cooking. Do you want to be able to adjust the temperature of the things you're trying to cook? Do you want to be able to simmer? Do you want to be simmering and sizzling? Or do you just want to blast, boil, scoff, eat, sleep? So these are the sort of decisions you have to make in terms of that. Also, you need to think about the fuel. If you're going just for an overnight thing, the simplest thing is a canister of gas. If you're walking across a continent, these may become hard to access and also start to rack up and be more expensive. So then you might want more of a multi-fuel stove that you can just top up with petrol from the roadside petrol station. So there's a lot of considerations to think about. I've got two options. This is the sort of the classic brew kit jet boil style thingy, and these are what you use on expeditions like rowing across the Atlantic. You use something like this, and essentially, I'm not going to give you a full cooking lesson. There's a burner, fixes onto the stove, fixes onto the gas canister. You press go on the clicker, and you get some serious heat burning away really fast, and before you know it, the water's boiling. It's one of the great sounds of camping. And then you can pour that into your dehydrated camping meal, your pot noodle, make your cup of tea, your cup of soup, whatever it is. So if all you care about is heating water as fast as you can, then these are great options. What's quite good is that the pan comes included in the kit. It's insulated, so it saves on fuel and boils quicker. It's got a lid that clicks on nicely. It's a lightweight lid, so you can get maximum boilage for minimum fuel at high speed. The downside of this, I suppose, is it's quite a bulky job, although no bigger than a big pan really. And all you can do is boil water at insanely fast speeds. So that's one option. If you're very pleased by small but effective bits of kit, then you might enjoy a tiny little burner thing like this little jobby. Here's one I didn't prepare earlier. I didn't make it easy to get a bag, and there's a plane going overhead messing with my audio. So watch me fiddle with this until the plane passes by, at which point I will seamlessly take it out of the bag and show you. It's a tiny little burner, very, very satisfying, this thing. And it screws onto the top of your gas canister like that. This one you do need an actual lighter for. You can't just light it with a clicker as you can with the other. And then in extreme negligence of health and safety techniques, you go like this. Oh no! Don't light your gas stoves like that. Quite fun though. So this burner goes. This is a pretty minimalist option really. You've got a small little pan, balance it on top, cook whatever you want to in there. But you can see from the sort of scorch marks in here that if you're trying to cook anything fancy, then it does tend to blast through a lightweight pan. So lightweight pans are great because they don't weigh very much, but if you're going to start trying to cook fancy things, it's a bit of a hassle, to be honest. So again, really this is a thing for blasting water at top speed, or perhaps a pan full of baked beans if you're going to be really fancy. Next up in the feast is, so I'm a bit of a bit uncouth, and I usually just scoff my food straight out of the pan, and then I wipe the pan clean with a piece of bread or with my finger, and then that's all the washing up done. you're a bit fancy, you might want to take a plate and a matching cup like this. The main benefit of cups like this is they look really good on Instagram. They're actually quite annoying because they're too hot to drink from. But yeah, consider, are you going to be buying food from the market, chopping yourself a salad in the woods? If you can be bothered, you'll be really pleased when you do, because it's actually far more delicious than a pot noodle. And then my cutlery choices tend to be pretty basic. A spork or a spoon or a fork. This one's very fancy. It folds in half. The things you never thought you needed in life. A folding spoon, very handy. Don't just take one lighter. If your stove is one that needs a lighter, take two, maybe some matches, because if they don't work, then you get no food for the night. And then what you take beyond that in terms of refreshments, that's up to you. Maybe you want to bring a few beers, a bottle of wine, whatever. You might like to make your coffee in a little coffee maker jobby like this on top of there. Very, very satisfying, very delicious. But do you need to bother carrying all of this with you? Or could you just get by with either a coffee bag, which are pretty nice actually for camping, or a simple, humble tea bag? These are big decisions that only you can make. How are you going to prep your food? So I always take a knife with me on trips for just general repairs, fixing stuff, blah, blah, blah. And the choice of knife that you might take, they can vary a lot. When I ran the Marathon des Sables through the Sahara Desert, 150 miles through the desert, weight was absolutely key. This was the knife that I took then, a tiny, tiny, tiny little Swiss Army knife on a lanyard, very tiny. When I cycled around the world, or pretty much any expedition, I've taken some variety of either a Swiss Army knife or a Leatherman. I actually really like a Leatherman that has some pliers on it, particularly when I'm on a bike trip. I've always found those really helpful. Plus, they're very handy for grinding fresh peppercorns. Or if you're just, if you are a very sophisticated Frenchman and you like to slice your cheese, maybe you'd like an Opinel knife. This one given to me by a Frenchman that I met in the mountains in Patagonia. We talked for about an hour. I never learned his name. And then he gave me an Opinel knife. Very nice. Or you may, if you're really into the sort of being out in nature and you want to whittle some wood at night, then perhaps you want to go for a beautiful handcrafted Breckfer bushcraft knife. Absolutely beautiful. Need to use very carefully, of course. But the point of all this is that the variety of tools that you take are completely down to your discretion. So for every single thing I'm talking about, there's no right or wrong here. You need to just factor in what is the right thing for you. So what are you going to eat on your trip? Are you going to be, as I said, the pub guy? Are you going to be the eating in the village shop sandwich guy? Are you going to take a pot noodle? Are you going to be sizzling and sautéing mushrooms? Or are you just going to stuff your mouth with a bag of Doritos and then fall into some E-numbered hallucinogenic slumber? Or are you going to be really, really, really minimalist and just eat a cucumber for your tea? Who knows? The choice is yours. One thing you'll definitely need though is water. Don't underestimate how much water you need for a long monologue video. It's always better to have too much water. The problem with water is it's big, it's bulky, and it's heavy. It's really, really heavy, but it's worth having. So absolute minimum a litre. Actually, that's not true. Absolute minimum for me for overnight is 2 litres. If you're going to be hiking a bit speedier, you might want to carry your water in one of these so that you can hydrate as you're on the march. If you're somewhere where water might be scarce, then you get these water bags. This one carries 10 litres. It's whopping and heavy when full, but very useful. It also doubles as quite a handy pillow, which is nice. Although the sloshing water in the pillow tends to make you need a pee in the night. The older one gets. Next, in my bag of tricks, nearly at the end, let me show you the next phase of the final things that you need for a backpacking trip. A couple more bits of gear that are really essential depending on the weather, you probably need some sort of hat. Midsummer, I tend to go for a sun hat like this. If it's not quite so hot, then I tend to go for, and I trust you do the same, a monogrammed, person embroidered, Micro Adventures baseball cap, one of a kind. But unfortunately in Britain, the weather usually is a bit worse than that. So then, woolly hat, pretty much, unless it's the middle of summer, I take a woolly hat with me, because this in terms of its how big it is, gives you more warmth than anything else, and it's great to have a woolly hat. If not that, then a buff is a really, really versatile, useful thing for. You can wear it as a hat. You can wear it as a balaclava. You can wear it if you get invited to a village pantomime at last minute to be the wicked old witch in the woods. You can wear it for that. You can wear it as a headband if you get a bit sweaty. You can wear it as a neck warmer if you're getting a bit sunburnt. You can also put it over your eyes when you're trying to get sleep at night. So that's a very useful bit of kit to have. Final bit of headgear, depending on where you are in the country and the time of year, is the Midgie net. Oh my goodness me. If you're going to Midgie land, please don't be in a bivvy bag. Just talking about this makes me itch. A night in a bivvy bag with midges is spectacularly horrible. So if you're going to Midgie land, please take a tent, or at the very least, get your bivvy bag up high where there's some breeze above the midges. But these can be really useful things. Oh my goodness, midges, just thought that makes me shudder. So, you're heading out on your backpacking trip. How do you know where you're going to go? You need to be able to navigate, don't you? So these days, increasingly, we navigate with our phones, and whether that's Google Maps for roads, whether it's the Alden Survey app for navigating on footpaths, and it's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. But of course, they guzzle through battery, so you want to put your phone on airplane mode as much as possible, which is a good thing to do anyway. Just please, one of the things you want to do when you're out backpacking is leave the real world behind as much as possible. Don't check your internet, don't check your emails, don't go updating Instagram. Take pictures by all means, but upload all that stuff once you get home. Enjoy what you're doing right now. But yeah, phones guzzle battery, so you need either a battery pack, or I've got this really funky gadget, which is, this is a battery pack, so you can plug in your phone via the USB charger thing, but it's also a light, which is really useful. So you can put this when you're cooking in the evening. If you're in a hammock in the trees, you can hang it on a little hook. If for some reason I guess it's for if you're in a camper van, it can magnet onto the wall of your camper van, or if you just fancy magneting onto a plate, you could do that. Quite a funky gadget that, but yeah, a battery pack to charge your battery. Your phone helps reduce the phone anxiety, one of the great traumas of our age. And of course, there's always just the simple classic head torch. Brilliant things for just being able to look around and see where you're going to go. I can't believe when I was a kid and we used to go camping that I'd have a handheld torch and try and sort of cook or put your tent up with a handheld one. These are absolutely brilliant. So, navigation's either by your phone, but I don't know if I'm old or just sensible, a bit of both, but I really don't like going out without a paper map as well. So paper maps are brilliant because if your phone breaks, you can still navigate via them. But beyond that, they're just really beautiful things to get out in the evening when you're sitting out looking where you've been, is to get out your map and study where you're going. So paper maps great. Of course, you need to be able to know how to use it, and don't go into the hills without a compass, a paper map, and crucially knowing how to use them both. I've got this funky little pouch. I've got loads of little pouches like this for just storing bits and bobs. At home I'm quite messy, but when I'm out camping I'm fastidiously neat, and I like to compartmentalize everything so it's all nice and stowed away. This is nerdily satisfying in that the little zip thing glows in the dark. Very handy. Speaking of glowing in the dark, night time, if you need the toilet, good to take some toilet paper. If you need to do your business in the woods, in the hills, in the mountains, do it well away from water, bury the toilet paper properly properly bury it. Please do not leave toilet paper just by the side of the footpath, otherwise I'll personally come along and punch you in the face. Toothbrush, don't forget your toothbrush, your mum won't be happy. And then linking to the leaving junk by the side of the roads, take with you a plastic bag to take your own rubbish away. You want to leave absolutely no trace of where you've camped at night. Maybe a squashed little patch of grass, but nothing else at all. There should be no trace of where you've been. And I've operated under that idea for many years, leave no trace. And if you Google it, I think there are 7 leave no trace principles that we should all pay attention to. But I'd like to go a bit further than that now, to an idea which I learnt from a brilliant organisation called Trash Free Trails, which is going beyond leave no trace to leave a positive trace, which is make the outdoors better than when you found it. And if that means picking up other idiots' dropped Lucasade bottles, then do so. Wherever you go, take a plastic bag, pick up other people's litter. Let's make the countryside more beautiful and improve the chances of increasing our access rights to different parts of the landscape. So take a bag with you and leave a positive trace. Finally, how do you relax? Well, I've different approaches to this. Sometimes when I go on an overnight backpacking micro-adventure, I'm doing so because I'm stressed with life. I'm busy, I'm frustrated, I'm annoyed with the real world, and all I want to do is just get away from it. So what I do then is I deliberately dare myself to be bored. I remember doing a webinar for AlpKit a while ago, and someone asked a question of, what do you do on those winter evenings when you've hiked, it gets dark about 4 o'clock, you set up your shelter, you cooked your tea, finished your tea by 5 o'clock, it's pitch black. You've got twiddling your thumbs for hours before you go to sleep. I really try and choose to welcome in that boredom, to just be, to listen to the perfectly timed crashing branch over there, to listen to birdsong, to watch the stars, to just watch the raindrops. Put out quite satisfying thing to do, put out a raindrop like this. When it's raining, put one of these just under the shelter of your tarpaulin so that it gets one dripping, and listen as it goes dum, 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 and the octave of music changing as it gradually fills up. So dare yourself to not need stimulation. However, that is ferociously difficult. So beyond that, take whatever you want. Take your frisbee, take your swing ball, who cares? Take a pair of binoculars with you. This might seem like a ridiculous thing to take on an overnight backpacking trip, but if you're trying to teach yourself to pay more attention to the birds out there, to learn more birds, then take whatever feels right to you. I always go out, when I'm going out, I always take with me a camera, or the camera on my phone. I really enjoy trying to photograph and document my trip. I usually take with me a notebook. I prefer writing my notes and things in a paper notebook rather than on a phone. Notebooks bend, phones smash. And then I also really like to have some evening reading material, so I usually take my Kindle, I load it up with a few good books to read, and then if you want to if you want to just make sure you get to sleep though, just take some absolute rubbish with you. Take a really boring book that will guarantee you fall asleep at night. Well, I'm exhausted. I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted. I never knew that I could say so many things about backpacking. I had a cheat sheet of notes. I haven't even looked at it, so hopefully I mentioned all of that on there. But here's the thing. The choices are yours. You can either be mega minimalist and take a great pleasure from surviving for a period of time competently and comfortably with the very smallest of gear, or you can take a mountain of gear and just really enjoy being luxurious in the woods and having a really comfortable night's sleep with a giant feather pillow. There's no right and wrong. Don't feel that the way you do something is wrong, and don't worry if you don't know how to do these sort of things yet. If you're just doing it for the first time, that's fine. You'll gradually pick up these habits over times you go out and practice. There's no right and wrong. Everyone is welcome backpacking. Everyone can, within their capabilities, go out and enjoy this, whether you're camping in a small woodland not far from where you live, or even a paid campsite if you don't feel comfortable with wild camping yet, or if you're going off to hike the Pennine Way or the new Wainwright Way that's becoming a national trail, or if you're going to walk across Australia. We're all doing this for exactly the same reasons. We're all doing it because we want to spend time in the wild, we want to have an adventure, we want to have fun, we want to appreciate nature, we want to care for nature, and the best thing we can do is to encourage other people to do exactly the same. So, load all of this stuff miraculously into your small little backpack. I just found one more item. How annoying! It's not even very interesting. If it's cold, take a pair of gloves and go backpacking. Enjoy it, good luck, and there's no right or wrong way to do this. Any sort of backpacking, though, is better than no backpacking at all. So get out there in the woods and enjoy it. And maybe even take a beautiful, comfortable blue armchair like this. Oh! 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 That really hurt. Cut. Sorry, I realise, having embarrassingly fallen off my chair, that I forgot to show you my setup of equipment. So here is how I set up my bivy bag, my tarpaulin and my hammock. Rigging up a hammock's pretty simple really, unless you're worried about rain, in which case you have to rig up a tarpaulin system up above, which is also pretty basic to do. You just string overhead height, maybe about, well, above your sitting up height, a tight line between the two trees, and then you put the tarpaulin over it in a A-frame shape and peg it down with guy lines. It's pretty basic stuff, really. The bigger the tarpaulin, the easier it becomes. The hammock itself, everything I don't need for the night I store on the ground, and then in the hammock I just have my my sleeping mat to keep me warm, as mentioned earlier. I have my sleeping bag to get into. Occasionally I use it like a quilt if I think the evening's going to be warm by unzipping it. I have my inflatable pillow, and then the only other thing I keep in there is just stuff that I think I'll need in the night, which is likely to be my head torch, a water bottle for a drink in the night, and my Kindle or a book to read until I fall asleep. And that's it. Sleeping in a hammock is fun. It's surprisingly comfortable. The secret is to force yourself onto a diagonal, to try and sleep diagonally across it and therefore make it as flat as possible. It's surprisingly comfy, and it's good fun, and it's a really nice idea to try if you know you're going to be able to find somewhere with two appropriately spaced trees to sleep between. Give it a go. If you're a proper, sensible, outdoor kind of guy, the sort of person who would back himself to make long monologue videos about tarpaulins, you would, of course, always neatly fold away the guy lines every time you use your tarpaulin to make it easy to put up next time. Because otherwise, 17 years will pass between finishing the last bit of filming and finally untangling everything and setting up a tarpaulin, which should be a very easy thing to do. Imagine it's a beautiful, sunny night, guaranteed no rain, that I wouldn't bother with the tarpaulin. In which case, my sleeping situation would be this. It would be bivy bag with a sleeping bag put inside it, pillow and a roll mat. Sleep out under the stars. Do that on mountain tops, beside the sea, rivers, anything. It's the simplest, most wonderful way to camp. But more often than not, you're probably going to want a tarpaulin as well. You rig up your tarpaulin, and then you can have your cooking gear just outside it, set up like that. And you make your whole home here. You see here, I've got my sleeping bag in this bit, but there's a huge amount of space in there where you can put all of your other things and all your other stuff. There are so many different ways to rig up a tarpaulin. There's loads and loads of them. It's a much geekier topic than I feel qualified on. You can even get a t-shirt, however, with loads of different ways to rig up your tarp. I chose this way now for two reasons. It's very simple, and it was the configuration of the available tree, so that often determines it. If the wind's coming from this, you want it's the wind's coming that way, the rain's coming that way. So for maximum shelter, you want to think about the position of the sunrise, the view. You might want to, I've put it up pretty high just for the video really, but you might have it really low down and hunkered down if the weather's pretty rough. You can put it in an A-frame, that's really quite sheltered. There's loads and loads of positions. The tarpaulins have got loops for extra guy lines, toggles for extra lines up to trees. There's so many ways. So having a tarpaulin in your kit is a very, very versatile, simple, but really useful addition to your sleeping. And probably on an overnight backpacking trip, this is probably what I'd use more often than not. Lunchtime. Oh, and one last thing. Every time you go to the woods or backpacking, leave a positive trace.